Good morning and welcome to the 11th meeting of the Education, Children and Young People Committee in 2026. This morning we'll be taking evidence on community sporting initiatives for children and young people, and at this point, as the discussion is certainly going to focus around, but not exclusively on football, I want to remind members of my register of interest that I am a match official officiating matches for the Scottish Football Association. And could I welcome this morning Debbie McCulloch, Chief Executive Officer, Spartans Community Foundation, and Mark Williams, Chief Operating Officer, Dennis Law Legacy Trust. So thank you both for joining us today. The committee was just really keen, first of all, to hear about both your organisations and what you're currently doing, how that's developed over the last few years, and your plans for the future. So quite wide-ranging, but just tell us a bit about where you are at the moment, what you're doing in communities, and how you see that going in the next few months and years. Mr Williams, will we start with you?
Okay, so thanks for inviting me down, folks. I'm from the Dennis Law Legacy Trust, which is a small children's charity based up in Aberdeen. We specialise working in areas of disadvantage all across the city. Most of the SIMD top 20%. We have three main programmes that we run. I've got lots of bits of paper in front of me. Don't worry, I'm not going to read them all. It's just to keep me on track and notes. But our main one is Street Sport. It's a programme that's been going in partnership with Robert Gordon University since 2006. So a very long established programme. It's gone from engaging with 3,000 young people a year. Last year we were over 30,000. So that the impact's quite a lot in terms of the size we are and also the amount of young people we work with in the city just on that one programme. It's primarily working with the emergency services, Police Scotland, Scottish Fire and Rescue, targeting areas of youth annoyance, and we've had huge impact on reducing that when the programme operates, due to as much as 80% in some of the city's most hardest hit areas. There's an area in Aberdeen called Torry. Back in 2019, it was #1 in the city for youth annoyance, just under 400 calls a year to the police and fire. We've introduced a Cruyff Court in that area since then. I'm happy to report today, we just looked at numbers just last week. Since then, it's reduced by 80% in that area, and Torry is now 13th in the city for youth annoyance. Another good example that one of our programmes in the Cruyff Courts that we deliver in these disadvantaged communities really do have a long, short, medium and long-term outcomes for the community. The other programme we run is Club 10. This is obviously Dennis Law's number 10, so you'll see a lot of kind of similarities around here. That's based up at HMP Grampian in the prison, supporting families affected by imprisonment. We read a horrible stat in Bernardo's website about 9 years ago that basically, if my son was next to a kid in school whose father or mother was in jail, that kid next to him was 3 times more likely to go to jail than my son, for no other reason than the family connection, which we didn't think was fair. So we want to try and do something with that. We engage with the prison, we deliver the family visits there now as well. And because of that, these young people now have a solid, good mentor. They come to our street sport sessions back in their community in the city. And they're now engaged in volunteering, our employability programmes and our youth forum as well. So much better outcomes, and we're seeing some great impact from that as well. Our last programme is Dennis Law's Academy. This is our employability strand, and this kind of connects a few other programmes around as well. So whilst we use football, we use multi-sport as well. Sport in general, the power of sport is huge, not just in mental and physical well-being, but everything else that I'm sure everyone around this table is very aware of. But it's about connecting the next steps. So we have a lot of young people who will drop out of school just because they can. They hit 16, they want to get away, the curriculum's not working for them. Where do they go? There's sometimes not always positive outcomes. So the Dennis Law's Academies are working with them, building up aspiration and motivation to want to do something. That's sometimes the big issue we face just now, particularly in young men. They can't be arsed. They don't want to do this. Or I'll be doing this because my dad does this, or whatever it is. We need to inspire them, and that's what this programme does. It makes them open-minded around moving to the next steps. There's many other things I could talk about this charity, which I can provide after if you wish, but that's a kind of snippet, and sorry. Once I get going, I get on the soapbox.
No, that's excellent, and that's the type of information we want, so very grateful for that evidence. Ms McCulloch.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity and inviting me along this morning. My name is Debbie McCulloch. I'm from the Spartans Community Foundation. I've worked at the foundation since 2009. We opened our doors in North Edinburgh in December 2008. And the foundation is the heart of the football club. We run the facility as a social enterprise that the football club hires, and we reinvest our profits back into our social impact programme, specifically targeting the community of North Edinburgh. Across those programmes, there's kind of 4 key thematic areas that we deliver on: youth work, education, physical health and wellbeing, and community engagement. And across those 4 programmes, we're probably delivering around about 35 to 36 programmes per week across the community, either on-site or in the local schools, to engage with young people. And I speak about young people because when we first opened our doors, it was very much focused on the young people of North Edinburgh. Since COVID, that reach has expanded dramatically. In that up until recently, our youngest participant was 3 years old and our oldest participant was 103. So our programmes have expanded, the need has got greater. We're working in an area where 30% of the children are living in relative poverty. Deprivation is a real issue in North Edinburgh. And we're there to ask one simple question: how can we help? How can we use the power of sport or football and people to be able to build relationships and trust with individuals in the community that can help them go from a survival attitude into that thriving environment? In terms of our education programmes, we run 2 alternative schools on site. We have a senior alternative school for 24 pupils across schools in Edinburgh. It's the only programme that we deliver that is actually citywide. And that programme is not like mainstream school. It is there to complement it, but it is a very different model where we take young people out of traditional mainstream education and give them a different environment to try and learn and thrive. Our junior alternative school is for 12 pupils across 3 local primary schools in North Edinburgh, and they come to us 1 day a week. And that specifically takes them out of the classroom into an environment where learning can be young person-led. It's not forced upon them, but simple things like our therapy dogs and young people wanting to read to those dogs is a learning opportunity in a different environment with them that will engage them in a different manner than mainstream education. I think the need has grown ever so greater, and if I can let you know that last year, in terms of referrals that we had for our senior alternative school, I think we had around about 8 places and we had 17 referrals from across the city. So the support there is greater than the demand. So we're trying to do more around that, but we only have a maximum capacity in terms of what we can hold, unfortunately. I think last year we opened a new 1.4 education and youth workspace on site that is in the corner of the stadium pitch, that was designed by young people, people that come to our senior alternative school, young people that come to our junior alternative school, and that includes a large youth workspace, a large kitchen, because again we know that food poverty is a real issue, and at all our youth work programmes we provide hot food. But also we know that in the kitchen, real relationships can develop. And we also have 2 sensory rooms, one that is, a calming de-escalation room, and another one that has a more educational element. And that's been a game changer for us. We've increased our youth work attendances have increased by 25% over the last year. It's given the young people their own space, their own home, which I think is really important in terms of making sure that communities actually feel part of something and that they have somewhere to go, that they can get help. As you're aware, we obviously have our Extra Time programme for the last 3 years that has been funded by the Scottish Government and will go into a 4th phase. Over the last 3 years, we've worked with over 300 families. And the biggest game changer with regards to that programme is that it's allowed us to really focus on a whole family approach. We recognised that when Mark was coming to our footy club on a Friday night or our STEM club on a Monday, that we were only skimming the surfaces of the problem. We weren't actually getting to the root cause of the problem, because the root cause of the problem was at home, whether that was poor housing, whether that was unemployment, whether that was addiction. So how can we help mum and dad? How can we help gran and grandpa, aunt and uncle? And for us, that has allowed us to provide that holistic approach around the families that can give them a better chance and better opportunities at life. In terms of the future, we're about to launch a new 3-year strategy that has been based on an extensive external consultation with the community. We're not here to drive that. They are. Where can we best use our people and use our skills to be able to make sure that people have better lives? And we've also done an internal consultation as part of that with our own staff. So our focus going forward will be very much on the transition element. So going from primary school to secondary school, as we know that that is a huge issue in our community, in terms of there's children not going to primary school, so how are they going to go to secondary school? How can we support them better with that transition by having a Spartans hub based in the local high school that can give them alternative ways of learning and building relationships that makes them feel comfortable at a stage in their life that can be fairly daunting. We'll do more around mental health as well, and we'll also introduce and increase our kind of support around STEM, because we see that as a very engaging way of being able to engage specifically with primary school pupils around them enjoying learning and them it being interactive and it being fun. I think that's me. Sorry if I've went on too long.
Please don't apologise. I mean, it's just very inspiring to hear what you're both speaking about. And I suppose my next question is really what you're doing in your localities is excellent. What's the kind of picture across Scotland? So where you don't have your own bases, are similar clubs doing similar things to a greater or lesser degree? Obviously, Dennis Law it's very much associated with the north and the northeast of Scotland. What's happening elsewhere and the opportunities that young people are getting who you work with, is that available to all? Mr Williams.
So it's obviously very different for us. We're not part of the SFA or the Football Club connection. Obviously, Dennis Law's huge connection there, but we're not associated with the clubs, for example. We work very close with the Aberdeens and Cove Rangers, but not in the work kind of way. However, we are part of quite similar networks. So there's a couple of networks UK-wide, notably Street Games is probably one of the biggest ones. We're one of the only Scottish members of them, just because they're like our work. So it's quite useful for that, because we can actually compare what work we're doing compared to what's happening down south. A good example is so on average their programmes that work with disadvantaged children, they're currently averaging around about 20% female participation. Ours is 40%. So we know we're doing something different up in the north east that's completely separate to what's happening down south, and it's working very well. We're very much youth person delivered. We have our youth forum. They direct what we do. Every single programme we do is created by ourselves and the young people. We don't take something off the shelf from another organisation, for example, and go, let's implement that, because that probably won't work in our city. We've learned that through our employability programmes. Just because we think that's a great 6-week programme, that's only going to work for 1 or 2 people, not for the whole 10. There'll be dropout. So if we can create our own programme using young people, that's where we have our different impact, and that's why our numbers have been so good, because we involve young people throughout, and it's tailored exactly the way they want it. Dennis Law's Academy is currently sitting at 100% record of having young people who have dropped out of school, either staying longer at school, moving into college or further higher education, or into apprenticeships or work. That's unheard of in other organisations like ourselves, down south, part of this network. But that's because it's done for the young people. Everyone's journey is different. One set programme does not work for every child. Same as school, for example, doesn't work for every child. The curriculum there, we've got to make it tailored, because every positive destination, whatever that may be, is different for young people. And that's where it's hard, because funding's tight. We can't just throw money at more staff to do more people. We've got to be very savvy and make it stretch. And it's key that it's done that way. Because what's the point in hiring more hands and more staff just to kind of water down what you're doing? But numbers is important. Like I mentioned that kind of 30,000 earlier. My answer to my team after that is, so what? What does 30,000 actually mean? What is the difference in those 30,000 people? That's the thing we should be tailoring down to. We've got some great funders. They'll give a nice check and then they'll disappear. We'll come back a year later. What did you spend on? How many people did you engage with? I actually don't like that. I want that kind of connection with a funder. I want them to know the difference they're actually making. And that's where we're kind of converting, talking future plans. This is the way the Dennis Legacy Trust is going to be. We're going to be much more story-based, the actual ripple effect of what little things can do. So that's how we kind of shape ourselves, and that's how we kind of fit in that way.
Ms McCullough?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's numerous clubs across Scotland through their foundations that are doing fantastic work in similar areas as ourselves. Falkirk, Hibs, Hearts, Morton, to name a few. I think where our biggest point of difference is that The foundation runs the facility as a social enterprise at Spartans. So the football club is our biggest customer alongside the youth section at Spartans. I think a lot of other clubs, the relationships between the foundations and the football clubs aren't as strong, which gives challenges internally and probably prohibits the amount of investment that foundations are able to make in their local communities. But for us, through our funding model of having a social enterprise, fundraising and grants, and the football club entrusting us with us running the facility, that gives us a sustainable model that allows us to have a strong significance. So I think as much as there's great work being delivered and everybody is there for the right reasons and is really pushing hard for change across the country and specifically around child poverty, there is certain barriers there that we are very fortunate that we don't face, because back in 2006 when this project started, our chairman, Craig Graham, had the creativity to say, we're going to actually do something different here and we're going to trust the charity to run a football facility. And the football club isn't going to profit from that. The football club is going to have to be financially sustainable in other ways. I don't believe that that model is replicated anywhere else across the country. So it's very unique, but it works very well. And the second point that I'd like to make is that facility. I think we're doing a great job at putting down more AstroTurfs and giving grassroots teams more facilities. But having that social home and creating a social village through the power of sport is more impactful than anything that I've witnessed in my entire life. And that's how we try to run Spartans, as a social village. You know, many people over the years have asked us, why do you not have a receptionist at your main door? Well, we don't have a receptionist because we don't want people to have to sign in. We just want people to be able to walk in, sit down, have a cup of tea and have a conversation with one of many of our wonderful staff. So I think being able to do things in an alternative way is extremely powerful, but those two specific examples of how we operate, I think, makes it extremely more open, non-judgmental and accessible for people, and more inclusive for people to feel part of something.
Okay, I think that's a very good start to where I think a lot of the questions are going to go with fellow committee members, and I move now to Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you. Good morning, panel. Thank you very much for taking the time to come along. As an Aberdeen Donside MSP, I absolutely know the benefits that the Dennis Law Legacy Trust gives across Aberdeen, and I just wish other cities could have the same effect. Debbie, I'm not so much aware of the work that you do, so I'll probably the question I'd like to ask is, and as someone around the committee who is probably the least interested in football, apart from my daughter who plays, how do football-based community programmes benefit young folk and their families? What outcomes would you like to see, Debbie? I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think like last year we asked young people who access our youth work programmes if they felt they had a trusted adult at Spartans, and the result was 94% yes. So I think having that trusted adult is really important. I think also just having people that are not part of mainstream education, for example, allows better relationships to be nurtured and to be developed. And for us, it's always been about those relationships. I think a lot of our systems and processes for young people and families are very transactional based. So how do you build a relationship around trust that can therefore support those young people or the families to be able to try and enhance their chances of, you know, having a better life? So for us, I think it's increased employment opportunities for people in the local community.
Within the Spartans, you're meaning, or out with?
Within Spartans, okay. Yeah. In terms of the employment opportunities, yes, definitely within Spartans. We've seen young people start with us from like 9 years old who are now, you know, near enough 25-year-olds in full-time employment with ourselves. And it's because of that journey and it's because of that trust. So I think in terms of the employment opportunities, the volunteering opportunities, and for families, it's a place where they can come and they can be heard. I think a lot of the time we listen to respond, but we try to listen to understand the complexities that they have surrounding their lives and how we can unpick that in a dignified way, and how we can do it quickly as well. I think time is something that we're very good at making sure that we plan ahead, but we also can be very reactive and adaptive. And I think COVID proved that as well. During lockdown, we transformed our site into a food distribution hub, with us distributing around about 700 packed lunches per day to children who would normally get free school meals, and family support packs on a weekly basis as well. So that ability to move around the red tape and bureaucracy and not have it is hugely impactful for families. But I just think that support mechanism is really important, and I think for young people as well, just even something as simple at our senior alternative school, we don't use Miss McCulloch, you know, we're Debbie, we're Emma, we're Diane, and just making sure that it's less formal and it's an informal approach that's based on relationships allows us to be able to engage with those young people. Because I believe out of like all of our kind of like leavers last year in alternative school, the majority left with, you know, a higher level of qualification than they ever would have had at mainstream, whether that was National 4 literacy or National 5 numeracy. So I think it gives people a chance and a place where they can feel safe and they can feel that they ultimately belong to something that can give them hope.
Thank you. Mark, same question.
Yeah, I mean, kind of a different model, but similar outcomes. I mean, sport and creative activity that's our main hook, you could say. It's the gateway to engagement. They call it trust adults, we call them good adults. You know, there's a key theme about the right people in the right place with the right kids, and also doing the right thing. We see the benefits. Obviously, the easy ones are improved physical and mental well-being. Huge differences. We use a tool called the Shinari Wheel. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with that. I'm sure you probably are. It kind of measures mental well-being in young people. Now, we've asked them, I'll try and break it down. Imagine 3 pizzas cut up into slices. Each section is SHA on the Shinari Wheel. We asked them to complete 3, one for how they felt at school, one for how they felt at home, and one for how they felt at our programming. On average, our programming finished above both school and home, and in particular around how safe they felt. They even felt more achieving at our programmes than they did at school. Respected but included. Now, these are massive drivers. Now, I mentioned the whole numbers thing around reducing antisocial behaviour. That's fantastic and really good and great for the community. But this effect on the young person, the differences these programmes make, that's the real difference our work is making. It's making stronger mentally and physically young people. Safe, trusted environments, key, hugely key. Every young person should feel safe in their environment, be that at home, safe, in a school, community, whatever it may be. Again, this is an area we work on very much so. Like we introduce these Cruyff courses, ensure that this is their Cruyff court, it's not ours, it's not the council's, it's theirs, it's the communities. These facilities make a big difference, and we're seeing that already. We've got 3 in the city just now, all different ages, all at different stages, making different outcomes. We're actually currently working with Robert Gordon University. We have a research fellow in for 3 years to measure the impact of a free-to-access sport facility in a disadvantaged community. And already the outcomes of these are proving what we're saying in these reports and the evidence. Strengthen relationship at home. If you're the young person, if the kids are starting to achieve, they're starting to move into more positive destinations, it's a happier home life. There's less stress, there's less pressure, there's less pushing, there's less arguments. You know, there's just a more rounded family cohesion. Diversion from antisocial behaviour. We know that when we're operating, there's less happening in the community that way, which I touched on earlier. And of course, the pathways and aspiration. What next? Where do you move from here? This is a really key question for young people. You know, start thinking about what do you want, how can we help? And that's what our programmes do for families and young people.
Okay, thank you. And I know from yourself and Debbie that your volunteers are absolutely key to everything that you do. Could I maybe ask how many of your volunteers come from being the bairns themselves that attended the sessions at the beginning and have paying back, I would probably say?
Yep, love that question. So it's our key. Volunteers are the spine of our organisation, as with most voluntary organisations. They're massive. So we spend a lot of time, we introduced a whole volunteer vision strategy around supporting this. But we have a pathway. It's participant, volunteer, into one of our higher programmes like the Academy I mentioned before, then into either work with ourselves or other organisations or further education. We currently have just under 100 volunteers across, well, I call them operational volunteers. These are the ones that are our sessions delivering activity. We have support volunteers. These are our fundraisers. And then we also have kind of trustees as well. But in terms of the percentage, I think we're currently sitting around at 60% of young people volunteering who have been a participant before are staying with us volunteering to give back to the community now. They're now, rather than being identified, and I can think of some names in particular, if you said a certain name in a certain community, they go, oh, he's bad news. That actually feeling of him is changing, whereas he's now been seeing as, oh, that's so-and-so's big brother, he's volunteers, he's cool, he's good, they want to be like them. And then that's where this pathway is coming. I keep mentioning Toy, but it's one that sticks in my head. Just gone last week, we had 17 young volunteers at that one session, all from used to be participants, giving back. And can you imagine how much it would cost to have 17 members of staff? We just cannot do that, simple as that. But we invest in the volunteers to give them that pathway and support right the way through. And yeah, it's a huge percentage of what we do.
I'll be honest, I didn't expect it to be 60%. That is a large number. I often see on the Facebook page of the certificates you're handing out for volunteer hours. And Debbie, I'm going to be asking you the same questions. I'm not leaving you out. On average, how many hours does volunteers give back?
I think last year we were just under 5,000. Which is huge. Okay. Yeah, and it's why as well we employ a volunteer officer because it's important that these volunteers, as we call the FARs, now I'm going to test them. Recruitment, retention, reward, and recognition. You've got to give these volunteers support. Every single member of staff is drilled to say thank you. That's someone giving their own time, and that makes these young people feel special. They don't get that very often in the communities we work with, where they're seen as someone who's doing good. So to feel quite, head up, chest out. It's a real strong feeling for these young people because it doesn't happen very often, especially in positive light.
Okay, thank you. Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, last year we were awarded the King's Awards for Volunteer Services as an organisation. The majority of our volunteers will be based within the football element, the football club side, mainly the youth section, so it will be mostly parents. So therefore, in terms of them moving through a pathway into jobs within the organisation, it's quite low because it's based on voluntary participation. Ultimately, there isn't many opportunities for employment within the football club side. In terms of the foundation, we have a lot of young people that will, I think I mentioned before, a lot of young people that will start with us by coming to one of our youth work groups or even our kind of alternative school. And then they'll go through a pathway of volunteering into an employment opportunity. So we have a couple of people that come to mind. Naomi Hume, who is our Assistant Operations Manager, that's been part of the project since we opened our doors, has lived in Pilton all her life and used to come to our street football in a safe place, which is a free provision where we open our community pitch after school every single day for local young people just to come down and link with our youth workers and kick a ball about. She has progressed right the way from that participant through to that volunteering into a full-time role where, it's an important role as well, especially on a match day, and has a huge level of responsibility. And, I often ask her, do you have ambitions to leave Spartans? And I remember after COVID, she was given an opportunity to actually go work at Walter Scott. Because we were working directly with them to provide the packed lunches. And she turned it down because ultimately that's her home, that's her family. It's been a safe space for her since she's been a young girl. And I think it's really important to us to recognise that we have a duty of care to those young people to be able to provide them opportunities in their local community, but also as well use their life experiences to be able to improve our programmes and our delivery and inform the decisions that we make. I made a very conscious decision around about 14 years ago to actually move to Pilton and live in Pilton because I felt if I was representing this community, then I wanted to be part of it, not just for the hours that I work, I wanted to be part of it full time. And I think that gives you a much greater insight around the learning, but also what can you do better in terms. So volunteers are at the heart of everything that we do. Do I have a number in terms of how many have progressed? No, I don't, but I will find that out and come back to you. But
and bigging up the successes. That's why I was asking.
No, but in terms of like, you know, the boys and the girls, I mean, I think we've got over, you know, 150 girls and 400 boys playing at the club on a regular basis. You know, those teams wouldn't go ahead, and that level of physical activity and social engagement and opportunity wouldn't be available without the volunteers, whether it's coaches or, you know, match officials, or it's parents being club secretaries and first aiders. They're integral to the success of everything that we do.
Thank you very much. I'll leave it there for just now, Convener.
Thank you. Willie Rennie.
I visited the Community Trade Hub in Leven recently, and what you were talking, Debbie, in particular, about the way that you treat the young people, the relationship you have, its first names, and they feel much more welcomed and appreciated as a result. And that's exactly the same model that they've got at the Trade Hub. It's more like fixing lawnmowers and go-karts and so on. But nevertheless, it's a similar model. And speaking to the young people there, they talk very warmly about the people that they work with at the Community Trade Hub. And they contrast that strikingly with school. There's two questions I've got. The first one is, I presume those who come to the alternative school also still go to school as well. What impact has it had on their attendance at school? Because it was noticeable in Leven how their attendance shot up after having been engaged in the Trade Hub. And then secondly, the Trade Hub spend a lot of time kind of getting pockets of money from different places to make the whole thing work. You seem to have a different model, but they get some pupil equity funding, but as they don't have a solid, reliable source of funding to give them the confidence that they'll be able to continue for years ahead. What's your relationship with the local authorities, both of you? And do you think that could be improved to tap into that different model of teaching? Debbie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of attendance, I think the alternative school model is for children that won't be really attending school out with that. So they have the opportunity to come to Spartans 2.5 days a week. That's funding dependent on what the school's budget is. So some might come for 1 day, some might come for 2, some might come for the 2.5 days. I think for us, it's recognised that mainstream education just isn't going to be a fit for them, and that's okay. So therefore, what can we then do to ensure that they leave us to a positive destination? Because I think that's really important. And I think I mentioned earlier, in 2025, all leavers left with a National 4 qualification in Maths and English. Some achieved National 5 numeracy, most gaining National 5 literacy. But all leavers progressed to a positive destination, whether that was college, whether that was employment, or whether that was to our kind of our Gordon Strachan personal development course that we run in partnership with Edinburgh College. Because for us, it's always been about creating that pathway right the way from preschool, right the way to like further education, so that everybody has that opportunity to be able to make that step. So in terms of improving attendance at mainstream education, that's not really important to us, because we already know that they're probably so far disengaged that isn't going to be achievable. Although, however, last year we did have a leaver that returned to school, to high school, to join S5 because they felt ready to go back into that mainstream education environment based on their 2 years with ourselves. So there's success in different formats. In terms of that. And just remind me about your second part.
Second one is the funding. The Trade Hub just seems to be able to kind of scrape together different pockets of money, mostly pupil equity funding, but it's on a relationship directly with each school. As a whole, there doesn't seem to be a kind of a block grant to support the base work that they do, which doesn't give them the confidence. I mean, is it pupil equity funding you're getting?
Yes, it will be PEF, CEF, and very much obviously up to the schools how they distribute that. I think our senior alternative school costs roughly around about £200,000 a year to run. Our junior alternative school is £40,000. And the senior alternative school, based on the funding that we receive from this, it's a three-part kind of funding model. The schools will fund part of the scholarship for the young person. There's a council grant, and then there's ourselves. I think it's not split into thirds, because probably the cost to ourselves is around about £80,000 of that £200,000. But we're very committed because we understand the impact that it has on those young people, and we're lucky as well that the junior alternative school is funded fully by a funder that we have a very good relationship with. So would we like to duplicate the alternative school model throughout the city? Absolutely. Are we willing to share our IP and what's went well and what's not went well? 100%. We are not precious about that at all. But a lot of organisations, like you're describing, it's very much hand to mouth. For us, the key to that is having the other two elements of our funding profile, which is us having a social enterprise. And I understand that a lot of third sector organisations won't find it attractive to make money. I think we need to change that mindset and make as much money as we possibly can, because the more we make, the greater significance we can have. And we're also very lucky that, you know, we have key individuals within our organisation that run a fundraising dinner for the charity every single year, with this year's profit around about £230,000 on the night.
Mark.
In terms of your first question around the increased attendance, yes, this is why we introduced the Dennis Laws Academy. This is what we wanted to happen. We wanted them to feel better about being at school, so they stay in school longer. And teachers have reported back that participants from that have come back to school more motivated, more interested in what's happening at school, in order to try and at least finish fourth year, get on to fifth year perhaps. So we are seeing that. It's early doors though, but it is happening. In terms of your second question, I can probably break that into two, into what works well and then also the barriers. So what we do, we feel that works well. I mean, collaboration is key. Every charity needs to work in partnership. Doesn't always mean when partners come together it works out nicely. So there are a few instances where we have to kind of realign. But multi-agency collaboration is very, very key. But it's also quite, I don't want to say competitive. There's a lot of charities doing work in schools. So for another one to parachute in, it's important you don't replicate. It's important you do things differently. It's important you may be looking at where the gaps are that aren't working currently. So that's where we've done something different, and we actually take the kids out of school. Because they don't want to be at school, so we'll take them out for that hour or 2 hours in the afternoons to work with them. And that's where we're seeing differences in our programme compared to other organisations that are currently delivering. You've got to make sure it's the right young people as well. It's not people who just don't want to go to maths today. It's got to be the ones that are potentially on the brink of expulsion, the ones that actually really do need this care now. And that's who we work with. So it's very important we work with the right kids. And shared values. You should never work with a partner that doesn't have the shared values, be that the local authority or whoever it may be. But the barriers, I think, to working with the local authority and all that stuff is short-term funding cycles. It's very competitive. Like I say, there's a number of other charities looking to get into schools to tap into those little pots. But they're little pots, and it can't go everywhere. So I'm quite keen that we wouldn't deliver a half-assed programme. It's going to be the way we want to do it, because we know it works, because we work with young people, and this is how they said it will work for them. So we need to deliver. We can't water it down, otherwise it'll start to not work. So that's one of the barriers. And then also capacity pressures, not just with ourselves, but with the schools. You know, they're stretched. The local authorities stretched. The police are stretched. We've got to try and do what we can. So that's the barriers, and that's what kind of works well as well.
And do you feel that both of your operations are properly evaluated by the local authorities, and that is accepted by the leadership as being properly validated, so that the funding, then the doors to the funding opened? Or are you still constantly fighting every step to try and persuade them? How does that work? How do they know what systems work and which don't?
Well, you're constantly fighting. It's 1st of April comes around every year, and you start at zero. You're constantly looking for money to come in. It's constantly competitive. You're constantly told by the local authority there's not as much as last year. So you're trying to have to backfill straight away, almost before things even start. it's just the nature of the beast. That's what it's quite bad that we're obviously the third sector, which this is just what we're used to.
Really interested in this, this different model of engaging. Because there's lots. I mean, we know the attendance at school, with some, it's terrible. And you get 15-minute timetables on occasions where it's just tokenistic. And what you seem to have, along with the Trade Hub and Leaving, seem to have alighted on just a different model where there's mutual respect. And as a result of that, you get engagement through the world of sport. In Fife, it's through the world of messing around with motorbikes and lawnmowers, hands-on, and they do construction stuff as well. So I see that it's a different model, and I just wonder how that gets filtered into the system so that everybody knows across the country that it works, but you're having to fight all the time.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere, and it is difficult, because there is always going to be a model that's done before. But it doesn't mean it works all the time. You mentioned motorbikes. Every kid's different. Every kid's got a different hook. It's important to find out what those hooks are and to try and involve that in what you do. Otherwise, it's not going to work. They'll filter away. I do think the local authority are coming around from our point of view up in Aberdeen. We've been established for a wee while now. We've got good numbers. We've got good storytelling, good impact. It's starting to be heard, and we are starting to get a bit more support. As okay, we know that works. We trust them almost to get on with it. The reporting side of things, when you get money, obviously, everyone wants to know what you spend it on, what the impact was, and that's great. However, sometimes I'll be honest, it's ridiculous sometimes. It's way over the top. I'll give you one example. There's a department in the council we got money from for this employability programme. In return, they wanted one of their members of staff to meet our kids on the programme one-to-one individually and grill them for an hour on questions. They want to bring the passport with them. If you're working with disadvantaged kids, you're not getting that kid anywhere near that meeting. But that's the barriers, and they're like, well, how do we measure this? We can't do, and we're not children either. I'm not going to send a kid in so you can then grill them and hear their sob story or how their parents' background. It's just not. So we've got to be gatekeepers as well. We've got to protect these kids. We're trying to motivate and inspire them, not.
And did the council accept it?
I actually gave the money back.
Really?
I didn't want the kids going through that. It wasn't fair. We've got to look after these kids.
How much was it?
10,000. And it's not. I'm not going to have those kids built up to then we take. Oh yeah, you're doing really badly, aren't you? Oh, it's so bad. Your life's so terrible. I'm not having it. It's as simple as that. We've got to be strong for these young people because who else will be? These are the disadvantaged kids in our city and in Scotland. We've got to protect them from reporting that is way over the top. So that's me. I told you about the soapbox at some point.
I can tell you care deeply about it. Thanks, convener.
So can I just check, when was that? Was that a recent?
It was 18 months ago.
Okay. And did the council take on feedback? Do they understand why you've not accepted, crucial funding because of the barriers they're putting in place? And has anything changed as a result of that?
Yep, we applied for the funding this year. We got it and I accepted it because our staff now, they provide the impact, and the council have been. They've seen the differences it can make, so they're starting to believe that our work works. Yeah. So therefore, they should just trust us to do their job. Yeah. Basically, we will provide the reporting, and it'll be much better than what they'll get, and we don't ask for passports. Yeah, good. Paul McLennan.
Mark, I think I had the pleasure of coming up, and I think it was a visit to the university, and I'm sure it was to yourself and seeing the benefit of that. And Debbie, I remember speaking to Dougie Samuel about this 10, 15 years ago, and his dream, and obviously in terms of that, so it's fantastic to see, and obviously he's still involved in that point of view. I suppose the question for me is, you're talking about almost the in-reach, people coming to you. I suppose it's what's the outreach in terms of going out to the community, because not everybody finds it easy to walk through your doors. Do you think you're still missing people who still find it hard to walk through the door? Kind of stuff. So I suppose it's kind of talking and asking you around about the outreach. Are you still missing people, or are you still think there are people out there who are still not coming through your doors? And what do you need to do about that to still try and reach even the most difficult to reach people?
I think that can still happen. However, we try our best to make sure that it doesn't happen and that we're inclusive and as accessible as possible. I think for us, we have youth workers and education officers that are based full-time in the local primary schools, and we know that schools are the heartbeat of any community. So we have a good sense around about what's going on and who needs our support and what help we can provide. We've been really conscious on the back of COVID, as I mentioned before, to extend our reach to that kind of older generation, whether that's through walking football, sporting memories, menopause goals, whatever that might well be. So we have invested considerably around that community engagement piece. North Edinburgh is fantastic at having place-based networks and collaboration. I think it's one of the best in the city. So we have a network called R Squared, that's around about kind of over 30 third sector organisations, and from that you get to know different people, but you also then have the ability to signpost and actually be able to directly help individuals that you might not know of and miss. And we've also got a collaboration with 3 other third sector organisations, Fresh Start, Move On and North Edinburgh Arts, called NESSE, which is North Edinburgh Support Services. And that, again, allows us to be really well embedded in the local community and for people to be able to access support. It's a no wrong door approach. There's no time limit in terms of that support. There's very little red tape because there's no outcomes actually associated with the collaboration. And I think for us, that makes sure that we are as prominent in the local community as we possibly can be, so that if someone does need help or support, whether that's coming to Spartans or us going to them, then we can either help them directly or we know someone that can, and we're able to provide that link in a way that we have relationships with the people. We have to have relationships with other organisations that are just as strong, so that that trust is there too, to ensure that that person is going to get the same level of support that I would expect them to receive.
Yeah, without repeating too much what Debbie said, is the barriers. You've got what are the main barriers to young people participating in anything really? It's cost, travel and feeling welcome. Those are the 3 main barriers that will stop, and in order to be more inclusive you have to identify them. So all of our programme is completely free of charge. I don't believe young people should pay to be with their friends and enjoy and be social. Everything that we do happens in the community. We go to them because that's where they are. I don't want anyone who can't get across, appreciate there's bus passes and all that kind of stuff, but let's just go to them, remove that whole barrier. Then feeling welcome. It's important that all our work programmes, sessions are, ensure cultural, social and personal relevance, and that everyone feels safe and welcome in their own community.
So in terms of that broader outreach, is there anything that you still think you would need, both of you, in terms of that, to think, like, okay, we still need to go that a little bit further? Is there anything you think you would still need, either from local authority or other partners or Scottish Government or whoever, in terms of, is there anything you still think you would need in terms of that? And that's not because the work you're doing is absolutely incredible.
Ratios, that safety ratio. So we have sessions in Lochside, which is in south of the city, and Northfield, which is in the north of the city. Both these sessions attract over 100 kids on a Friday night, for example. Now, I try to operate in a 12-to-1 ratio, so the reason for that is that every kid is actually spoken to at some point, because if that ratio comes down, suddenly there's a kid that's turned up, not said hello to, you don't know, not got to know them. So I can't get more staff. We try and treat the volunteers and get them to help them do it. But yeah, maybe the local authority, they have youth work teams. They could come to our session, for example, and help improve that ratio that every kid is spoken to for a good 10, 15 minutes about their life, what's going on that week. So it's capacity to increase the amount of good adults at those sessions. That's where we could probably do with more help.
Debbie, anything you still think you need?
For me, one of the greatest kind of learns over the last kind of like 3 years has been through the NESSE project collaboration. We've had funders that have been extremely brave, and one funder 2 years ago actually gave us £5,000 to distribute to local families in North Edinburgh who were in crisis. Didn't ask any more. And part of that £5,000, there was also £1,000 of cash that they said, listen, we're happy for you to give the cash. Now, my finance manager wasn't very happy because he's thinking about an audit trail. And anyway, we managed to get around that. And I think for me, it is about helping families to get out of crisis. But then again, when they get out of crisis, how do we then allow them to thrive? That's the part that we miss. We just feel we've got them out of crisis, good job, right, okay, on you go. That next step is even more harder than getting out of crisis. But going back to like the cash part, we had a family that had a son that was at the Royal receiving treatment for cancer, and his mum was really struggling to afford taxi and the food costs at the hospital because she was there every single day for the treatment. And we gave her £200 cash. And we didn't ask for any receipts. We just based it on trust. But we said, listen, this will be a short-term solution to be able to help provide you so that we can then therefore look at a longer-term solution to see how we can ease this stress that you have that is in addition to your son being extremely unwell and poorly. And the relief that that gave her was massive, but also the trust element too. So my ask would be that there would be less stipulation around funding and that organisations are trusted to spend it, but more importantly, spend it well. Because we know the people that are in need. We know that there'll be mistakes and there'll be failings, but we can learn from that. Because ultimately most people will come back around. So yeah, that would be my only ask.
Thanks, Convener.
Ross Greer.
Thanks, Convener. Good morning, both. If I could just follow up on that example there, Debbie, the level of need out there in our communities is absolutely vast, and it'd be great to be able to just give cash to everybody in that situation. What level of demand is there in the communities you work in for that kind of support? I mean, are you turning people away right now who you would like to support in the way that you were able to support that family?
We're quite fortunate in North Edinburgh because there is such a strong amount of good third sector organisations and support available. You know, that pot of money from £5,000 actually was increased to £20,000 by the funder this year. We could distribute that like that, but we tried to spread it over the time, I think, because we have specific hotspots, specifically around like Christmas time, for example, where families are in desperate need. So yes, I think we're helping the situation, but I think Edinburgh hides its poverty very well, and I could probably say that because I'm from Glasgow. But I do, and I think that is still a real issue, and I think and I think it's inherited as well. It's part of a circle of a family. So how do we break that cycle? How do we ensure that people have the opportunities that maybe their mum and dad didn't have? And I think through providing support, not only in children that are struggling with education, because there's a lot of high flyers out there that, you know, are doing very well in education but have similar challenges at home, and we have to recognise that, and we recognise that through providing an intern programme with our education officers, where we kind of select four students from Craigroyston High School every single year, and we pay them as part of that internship, but we take them out of school one day a week to work alongside our education officers. So yes, the problems are still desperate, I would say, and I think specifically around the cost of living, food poverty, I think has been slightly brushed under the carpet, in my opinion, as well. We still have children that come to our youth clubs that are evidently hungry, and during the summer there, even we had kids that were in residentials with us, you know, overnight, and they were actually not going home before the morning club because they knew that they were going to get a hot meal. But they knew if they went home, that wasn't going to happen. So evidently, there's still a huge level of need. And we will do our very best to continue to try and support that. But we're very fortunate with the network that we have around us in North Edinburgh that I feel we are slightly changing a corner. And I do think, going back to Willie's point around local authorities, I do feel that the City of Edinburgh Council, in recent changes of leadership, etc., is looking to do things in an alternative way, and specifically around collaboration and wanting to hear what our learning is, because we've never been one to bat them over the head with it and say, you know, you need to give us this. It's more around about, we're here, we're at the coalface, we know what the challenges are, how can we be creative around, with the skills that we have and the knowledge that we have, to have a community that's fundamentally built more around community wealth as well, which I think could be a really positive step in the right direction, specifically for a community like North Edinburgh.
We've just passed a bill in this Parliament on community wealth building.
Yes,
hopefully contribute to that. What you mentioned there, what you said in response to Willie, is interesting around that kind of shift in attitude from the council. Is it fair to take it from that in the past it maybe felt like there was this really strong network of third sector private organisations doing a lot of that community solidarity work, and separate to that there was the council, and there were kind of artificial barriers in between, and that's maybe easing now? I'm particularly interested in how easy you find it to engage with the likes of social work, for example, because I imagine a lot of the families that you're engaging with will have social workers. Do you find that interface to be a collaborative one, or is that the kind of space in which these barriers are created, maybe not exactly the same, but an equivalent to the example that Mark gave around funding conditions that make it impossible to then work with them?
I would say it's collaborative, but I would say it's long and it's lengthy, and it doesn't move quick enough to be able to support the young people at that moment in time. Our education manager, Emma, who oversees our senior alternative school, will have a lot of links with social work, the schools, and also CAMS. But in terms of being able to get any progress and to be able to try and get answers, or whether it's, around additional support needs and people being diagnosed properly, it's hugely challenging. I think across our kind of 5 local primary schools that we work with, around about 45% of the children on that total school roll have additional support needs. So we're facing a tsunami on that. Based on your question around the local authority, COVID was a game changer for us because the third sector stepped up. And for me, that really changed the perspective of a lot of people, not just within local authorities, but across the board. And I think all of a sudden, when public authorities were closing community spaces and facilities that were there to support the local community in a time that was difficult for everyone, the third sector remained open. And I think we showed how quickly we were able to pivot and adapt to a situation that none of us had ever dealt with. I remember standing in the Best Way cash and carry with Dougie Samuel, our CEO at the time, and thinking we're trying to buy around about £1,000 worth of goods for a local pantry just to be able to keep them open and to ensure that the local community had some access to it, and thinking, what are we doing here? But we were there and we were able to do it. So I think that was, if there was any success out of COVID, which I'm not sure if there was, but that was one successful thing, in that the third sector was recognised in a way that I think is positive for the local authority and Scottish Government to be able to engage with and use to positively try and affect systematic change ultimately.
Is that a two-way relationship now? So it's not just when you have families come to you and you know that they need additional support, you try to engage with, whether it's social work or another part of the council. Is the opposite happening? Are you getting whatever department of the council, social work, education, etc., coming to you and saying, we have this young person or this family and we think you would be able to support them? Do you have the capacity to do that? Are you getting that proactive outreach from them?
Yeah, and again, going back, and I know I keep harping on about it, but it's based on the relationships. It's who you know, not what you know, really, and I think I think there is a much more transparent kind of process happening where you can pick up the phone and you can have honest conversations and try and work together collaboratively to be able to try and achieve what you want to be able to achieve for that young person or that family. And I think a lot of that has came from Paul Lawrence, the CEO at City of Edinburgh Council now, and him previously being Director of Place, and working closely with the Nessie collaboration, and us really kind of sharing with Paul specifically around the housing conditions in North Edinburgh, the challenges and the tragedy that is in that kind of local community. But us also presenting positive solutions. I think it's really important not to just shove challenges in people's faces. We're coming to him and saying, right, okay, well, actually, if you gave Nessie a housing officer, that housing officer then could like speak directly to the families and then speak directly to the repair teams, so that that connection that we were talking about could come together much more collaboratively, but we could get the repairs done much more quicker instead of, you know, over 5 years, mould being painted over 3 times.
Thanks very much. I'm conscious of time, so Mark, if I could just come to you, particularly the example you were giving at the start around Tory and the impact that your works had there. I'm interested in how work like that comes about. Was that a kind of unilateral decision that the Trust took? Did the Council approach you? Is it a direct relationship you have with the emergency services, with the fire service and the police? Or did the Council facilitate a relationship between you and the emergency services? How does something like that come about? Who instigates it, and what are the partnerships that then come about as a result of it?
Yeah, it takes time, without a shadow of doubt, to build up the right relationship with the right people. The Tory work, its success probably stems from work that was done in a different community years before. For example, the Crowthcourt Dennis Law was built up in George Street, right in the heart of the city. That was a real tough conversation with the local authority to, one, get permission to build it, one, contribute to the funding to build it. It was a long conversation, it was a hard one, but the impact of that made the second one much easier to happen. They'd already seen, okay, well, this actually will work. So we identified that area, working with the emergency services. It was a hot spot for youth annoyance by quite a lot. Like I say, it was #1 in the city. We then went through the process with the council to build it, and then start our natural work. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to go over it again because of time, but yeah, it's been hugely successful. But it comes from the young people. Even let's take football, for example. Tory did not have a boys' football team in Tory because nobody wanted to work with the boys from Tory. They were too hard work. One of our staff members, he actually volunteers and created a football club called D United, using the boys that were causing. They were called the Finnan Shop Boys. I won't go into that, but you can imagine what they were up to. He took them. They were coming down to the Crowthcourt every night because they wanted to play with themselves and enjoy football. He took that, got into the street sports session, worked with them closely, created an under-17 team, and that's transformed that area. The way that football team works is, you know, kids can't afford direct debits to join football clubs nowadays, not especially ones we work with. It's completely free of charge. The treasurer was one of the players. The fixture secretary was one of the players. Try and give them support, and they had a great season. They're now an amateur football team, and it's made up of participants from Tory, using the Crowthcourt, using the grass pitch next to it. It's transformed. We've got a new safe space project being introduced there as well, where we're going to start we've just come to SQA accredited centre. We're going to start delivering employability modules, so we can take the courses and modules at college into the community to work with the kids that need these ones the most to get them going. So it's really snowballed. But it's work. Listening to young people what they want and how they want it to be delivered. It's key. And then having the right good relationship with them, and that's also key. We're not authority. We're not telling them what to do. We're actually asking them, what do you want to do? And that's the difference.
And the relationship between you and the emergency services in that situation, particularly the police, I imagine, on a more ongoing basis, is that something that is, or at least was, originally facilitated by the council, or is that just a direct relationship that you have with community officers?
It was a direct relationship. They sat on our steering group. They were asked to, in order to provide stats, basically, so we knew where to operate. So we weren't just throwing a dart at the map of Aberdeen. It was very. They have storm reports that shows us exactly where the hotspot is. You know, this part of the community at this time on this night. That's where we delivered our mobile arena and started work from there.
And it sounds like a huge amount of the work that you're doing is at your own direction. You know your communities. You know what they need, and you know how to facilitate that. Alongside that, are you getting approaches from the council either about particular parts of the city that they want you to work in, or particular families or individual young people that they're referring on to you? Or are they trusting enough? Are they quite happy to know that you know what you're doing, you know who you need to work with, and you will do that to the extent that capacity allows?
A balance of that. Like, we have built a relationship with the council. The council have been very good with us over the years as they've started, like I say, trust us more to get on with it. They're very stretched themselves. You mentioned the time it takes to do something potentially within a local authority. It can be quite long sometimes, but we're fortunate we have that relationship with them. They do trust us, and we do come with us. We're now involved in a lot of the local area improvement plans because they can see the work we're doing is obviously contributing to them. So they see us as a key player in those. So we sit on a number of the different LOIP groups within Aberdeen City, contributing our numbers to help. And that's where we hear a bit more from the council about what is needed or what the wider community wants. Because obviously we're a children's charity, we're very much focused on the young people in those communities. And then we can hear back, what's the actual impact of a Cruyff Court to the older members of the community? What the difference it makes. They're actually feeling their communities feel safer and healthier. Brilliant. We didn't know that because we were just listening to young people. So yeah, but we get that from the local authority, which is good. And yes, we have a very good relationship with them, and it is getting stronger as we go on. And yeah, I think it is through just, they trust our work and they're there if we need them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Arch. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Just in response to some of the evidence we've heard, I'll take in Jackie Dunbar.
Yes, I should probably put it on record. Convener on my register of interests. I was a councillor at the time that the George Street Cruyff Court went through council and was agreed. So just for a matter of transparency.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to Paul O'Kane.
Very grateful, Convener. And good morning to the panel. Just, I think, alighting on some of the themes that colleagues have raised. Willie Rennie's point in particular about trying to understand the benefit more widely and trying to communicate that across Scotland, because we know that there are projects similar to what you're doing in every part of the country. In my own area, I do a lot of work with Mark Breslin, who runs Barhead Community Boxing Club, but Mark is also the senior lecturer at the School of Education at the University of Glasgow. So Mark has actually done an academic study of this, which you might be familiar with, which is about strengthening pupil engagement, intelligence and belonging through alternative education and community partnerships. And Mark obviously would recognise in his paper many of the themes that you're talking about really directly. So it's good to see that robust sort of academic evidence is there about the impact it makes. So I wonder, I don't know if you've engaged with that or you're nodding, Debbie, which is a good sign. But I mean, yeah, do you feel that is going to be helpful to this committee and to the successor committees in this Parliament to understand how we're better at funding and supporting this on a national level?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in 2019, we went through an SROI report with UEFA and the SFA alongside Ayr United, and that was hugely beneficial to us in terms of really understanding what our impact is, because sometimes it's hard to quantify, and a lot of funders nowadays maybe aren't too focused on the numbers. They're more focused around about how you make people feel and what change you make to their lives. So I think for every pound that we invested, the social return on investment was £6, but I would expect that to be much more higher nowadays. We have just recently invested in an insight and engagement manager because we recognise that we need to measure things better, but also measure things that matter the most, not necessarily to funders or anyone else, but the people in the local community of North Edinburgh and our organisation. And we've also just recently started a pilot research project with the Edinburgh University, which in simple terms is looking to find out what our secret sauce is. Because if someone asks me that, it's quite a difficult thing to answer. And we're specifically focusing on our junior alternative school provision. And that kind of P6, 7 transition. How does that work with children that are part of the programme? How does that work with children that are not part of the programme? And what are the potential differences? So I'd be happy to share that with the Scottish Government and Parliament once we see the results of that. And our hope is that we'll be able to extend the project further. But as you're probably aware, academic research is very expensive.
Yeah, that is true, but it's so valuable, I think,
Absolutely.
in terms of quantifying and qualifying what we're talking about. And I should have mentioned that piece of work that I was referring to was actually co-produced by Jessie Mitchell, who's a principal teacher of health and wellbeing at St Luke's High School in Barhead. So I think when we talk about alternatives to school, it doesn't sit in isolation from the school, because you guys will be working very much in tandem and in partnership with school, and actually encouraging to see as well. Mark, do you have any reflections on that?
Data drives change, basically. We take quite a structured, evidence-driven approach to collecting data. It's important you kind of diversify how you measure and what you measure. We've got a number of monitoring tools. I mentioned the Shinari wheel before. We know the police stats from before and after. We measure the gender splits. We measure attendance, all these kind of numbers. But it's also kind of longitudinal data as well. That's key. Like, we've been going for 15 years, so I can tell you the numbers going back 15 years and where they've gone from here down to here in different communities and different, be it volunteer hours, be it we obviously have the postcodes where each volunteer is from. So I can tell you which community we have the most volunteers from, if we have a disadvantage one, the age of them, all these kind of things that we can then showcase over the year. But having, like, yes, like a rubber-stamped university research project, it's key. I mentioned at the start, we were very fortunate just now to have a research fellow for the next 3 years to measure these short, medium and long-term outcomes of a Cruyff Court in a disadvantaged community. That's going to be really key for us. We want to create a model of impact that, I put a lot behind Cruyff Courts. They're not our invention, but they work in these communities that we work in really, really well. I believe investment in these types of facilities will save a fortune longer term. Short term, you've got improved physical and mental well-being. Medium term, the community is feeling safer. There's less antisocial behaviour. Longer term, we've got, we talk about the Cruyff Court Dennis Law back in 2017. That community used to be in the top 10% on the SIMD. It's now coming up to top 15 and moving that way. These are the changes these free-to-access facilities are making. But I can't prove that, because I'm not an academic. I think you probably got that very clearly already. But there are people who will know what they're doing and know exactly what to measure, how to measure it. So, yes, so having this research fellow is going to be key for us, but it costs a lot of money. I mean, to give you a number, it costs 130 grand a year for a research fellow. That's a lot of money for a third sector to gamble on, to be quite honest.
I suppose that's a challenge, because you absolutely want to be spending every penny on the delivery because you know it works, but it's chicken and egg. You've got evidence that. But I think what's crucial for us, I think we've heard this morning, we've got an example from the east of the country, from the northeast. Willie was talking about Fife. I'm talking about the west coast. This is happening in every corner of the country. So we need to try and pull all of that evidence together so that actually we can take more of a national approach to this. Would be my view. In terms of that academic partnership as well, Mark, I'm interested in the work that you do with RGU, because obviously you're closely aligned and associated with them. And how much has the university been a sort of anchor for you and a support in terms of both resource, but also, I suppose, helping with some of that evidence base?
As a charity, they're our key partner. The Street Sport programme was actually started by Robert Gordon University back in 2006, and the Dennis Law Legacy Trust absorbed it in 2012 and then started to introduce our programmes. But the partnership between the two has always been there. We're based on campus. So this, for a model, for a third sector, it's fantastic. We have no rent, no gas, no electric bills. I'd hate to say the word conveyor belt, but we have students coming consistently as fourth years leave, first years arrive. We're tapping into volunteering for them, so numbers help with that as well. HR, finance, all these departments that give us in-kind support, it's massive. Money-wise, so the Dennis Legacy Trust overall running costs for the entire year, just over 400,000 for everything I've mentioned today. But that's largely part of in-kind support, and the university, by what they do, have been a massive part of that. The belief they've had in our programming from day one, they're the one that's funding the research fellow, for example. It's huge. They believe in what we do, and like I say, it's very key to work with partners who are like-minded, and the university is very much like-minded with the Dennis Legacy Trust.
And Debbie, you mentioned University of Edinburgh. I mean, is that the early days of a partnership there, or have you been quite established with them for a while?
Yeah, I mean, we've been quite established with them for a number of years. The football club was obviously founded by university students, Edinburgh University students, so there's a long history there. The partnership, our pilot research project was supposed to start last year. There was challenges around that, specifically from having research assistants that were only going to be given kind of 1 day a week, and then they get an offer of a placement that's 3-4 days a week. Now we have someone in place that has a youth work background, which is ideal for this type of pilot. So yes, we'll hopefully have our kind of findings by the end of this year. And as I said, we would like to do a much broader research project to be able to capture the wider social impact that we're delivering on a daily basis across all our key thematic areas. But ultimately, as Mark says, the money associated with that could be a slight challenge.
That's useful. I mean, I think, again, it's for future committee to take this forward and to reflect on a lot of that. I think that's really useful. And Convener, I'm happy to share the academic paper I referenced with the clerks so that can be shared. And given that it was co-produced by a principal teacher at St Luke's High School, I should declare that I'm a former pupil.
Thank you very much. We move to John Mason.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Convener. Yeah, I was going to ask you about funding, but we've kind of covered that already, so I'll try something else. On the physical activity side of things, I mean, you've both totally convinced us that you're having a huge impact on young people's academic improvement, family, youth disorder, many of these things. What about physical activity? Because we saw a figure that only 17% of adolescents are getting the physical activity that they should be getting. Is that something you're emphasising? Because it is a sports club. Mr. Williams.
It's a tough one to measure because we're based in the evening or sometimes at the weekend work. We do, like I say, in terms of numbers, we know how many we're getting. We know how often that person is always coming. We've got to know the young person. We've got evidence, like I say, the families were moved from Tory up into the Bridge of Dawn as part of the rack that was happening in the city. We know the kids are still travelling back on buses to our street sports session because it's the activity they can access for free. We have done a little bit so we have a youth forum called Grants that speaks around where young people feel welcome, where they feel safe, and which affects their kind of activity rates. And if we're going to rewind back 10, maybe when we were all younger, we felt Guides, Cubs, Scouts. We'd go out with family, go down to the park to play these stuff. Kids there's a trend where they don't feel that welcome now because they can't afford things like that. They can't afford to go to the leisure centre to have a badminton match or whatever that. We are seeing they will now automatically absorb into the spaces like shopping centres, into McDonald's. Why? Because there's lighting, there's heat, there's warmth, there's maybe free Wi-Fi. That is why. That's where they're going to these places. And they're suddenly not going to, parks aren't as busy as they used to be. Neither are the places maybe traditionally young people went. Which is, from my point of view, that's actually quite alarming. That they feel that's where they can be safe, welcome, whatever, rather than being a bit more physically active and enjoying. But that's, again, the facilities we offer. The Cruyff Courts are essentially an answer to our street sport programme being in the community every single night. They can now access a free facility every night in their community. So we can't track it because it's really hard to write someone there with a clipboard 24/7, but that's where we hope our research can actually indicate how often are these courts being used. How does that compare to maybe a community that doesn't have a free-to-access community court? I'm not sure. So these are all numbers we're very interested to know because we believe we are making a difference on that. It's just really hard to prove it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you must get a feel for the young people just by looking at them as to how fit and active they are and if that's getting worse over the years. Because I think that, things like the military say that the young people coming into them are less active than they were. Yeah. Ms McCulloch, I mean, you're working with the schools and everything. I mean, do they ever talk to you about concerns about physical activity or lack of it or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think especially at primary school where, there's not a specific element delivered on a weekly basis, from a PE teacher point of view, where it might come down to actually the teacher to be able to deliver that physical element that might not have any experience in doing so. So yes, I think we obviously try to provide as much physical activity alongside our programmes as we possibly can, whether that's football or other sports. It doesn't necessarily have to be football. It will be young people driven ultimately, because we also know that we want to try and get girls more active and involved in sports. So sometimes that has to be through dancing or gymnastics or even arts or crafts or whatever that might well be. But just to try and engage with them with the idea that physical activity is good for you and it can be a positive thing not only for your health but also for your social skills too. And I think that's important because I think that integration for the young people that we see nowadays, we obviously have a very diverse community in North Edinburgh. I think Craig Royston High School has like 37 different languages in it, so therefore that social element can be a challenge for them. But also going back to your point around the older generation, what can we do more there? I think is a question that we asked ourselves when we were writing our new strategy, as it was evident to us that previously from 2023 we were called the Spartans Community Football Academy, and I think people just associated us with being a kind of football venue and an elite performance centre. We changed our name to give us a greater level of identity and branding and understanding, and I think that's helped with the older generation. We've seen our walking football sessions double. Our para-football group has over 150 players now, with a variety of disabilities and additional support needs as well. So that audience is starting to come to us. We're going to them as well, like we were before, but they weren't maybe as keen. So it goes back to my earlier point of having a venue that's seen as not just a football ground but also a social village that can accommodate people of all ages. The next step for us will be how can we integrate the young and the old together, because we know that that can be hugely impactful, especially for the older generation and the younger generation too. So more work to be done in that area, but I think we're taking positive steps to be able to try and help support that.
That sounds good. And I mean, I think clearly a lot of young people, especially young boys perhaps, are attracted to come to yourselves because it's very football orientated, but not, maybe this is an unfair question to ask, but I mean, not every young person is into football. I certainly wasn't when I was younger as far as playing was concerned, or rugby, which was the alternative at the school I went to. I mean, have you got any awareness of other groups out there? I mean, I'm thinking like athletics clubs and things like that. Are they also doing the kind of things that you're doing? Or is football, in a sense, in a privileged position because it's so high profile and you attract more funding?
I'm not entirely sure the answer to your question. What I would say is that I probably disagree slightly around football being attractive to funding based on my experience in the last 17 years. I think football's had to work extremely hard, specifically the foundations and trusts that are linked with clubs, to prove themselves that they are more than a football club and that they are here for the right reasons. I think at Spartans, our moral compass and our why has always been clear. We're here for good, and that's it. And whether that involves football or whether that involves different sports or no sport whatsoever, then there's something that we can help you with, and there's a role or an opportunity that we can ultimately give you. And I think, but I do feel that football is proving itself and going above and beyond through the extra time investment and the delivery that the clubs are delivering across Scotland in terms of after-school clubs, holiday clubs, parent groups and support. That, you know, football can be that hook, but ultimately it's based on the people and it's based on the relationship. Within our extra time, we were very clear that when we put the new team together, which was 4 full-time positions, that at least 50% of that team had to be from the local area, because that connection is so vital and so important. So I think, obviously, we've got a bit of a wave to ride in the successful qualification of the World Cup. That will hopefully get more boys and girls playing the sport of football or any sport. But hopefully, you know, that can bring greater success, greater recognition. But I still think the funding landscape for football trusts is still hugely challenging, as it is for organisations across different sports and different third sector.
Mr Williams.
Yeah, we're slightly different because we're not part of a national governing body. Obviously, you have the SFA, you have the SRU, all umbrella organisations who can filter money down directly to clubs. We don't have that option. So for an organisation who delivers, well, not just football, rugby, tennis, you name it, it's actually hard, really hard to get funding. And we have to find it in little pots for different other trusts and foundations rather than relying on a governing body, so to speak, to support or help. But I'm aware, obviously, the governing body, you know, they don't fully fund many things, but there is some coming down. But like so, there are organisations like us. There's not many, especially up in the northeast, but there are a lot in Scotland who wouldn't have access to funding like that, even though we're doing, as hopefully you've heard, just as impactful work.
So if a young person who wasn't into football or rugby, but say wanted to run, I used to do cross-country or swimming or curling or something like that, could they come to you, or are there other groups they could go to?
Yeah, no, they'd probably come to us first, just because we are multi-sport. They're with their friends, that's how they normally find out. And we have, you know, what do you want to do tonight? And our vans are full of sports kit. And if it's not there, it will be there next week. That's one of our things. If a kid asks for it, we'll make sure it's there next week if we don't have it. Just because every kid is different. Every hook is different, every kid. It's not always sport, so it's creative activity. It could be tie-dye, it could be anything simple as that. You know, we've got a group of 6 young girls. They call themselves the Queens. They from Lochside Academy. Drinking, underage drinking. Well, I'll be very honest with you. Really hard to engage with, really hard to get. You know, antisocial behaviour, tough group. Amy, one of my staff, is fantastic with them. She's got that connection, that good adult relationship. So, well, what do you want to do? So, we want to. You know, they want to leave school, yeah, but they wouldn't go to college. They weren't that. It's not for us. Amy managed to get them into college because she took them there on a visit to create tote bags. You know, they designed their own tote bags, sewing, created this thing in college. they suddenly want to go to college. We've had the same with boys and bird boxes. You know, they built bird boxes in the joinery department at the college. They had no interest in going to college before. They all want to go to college now. It works, and the hook is different. So whilst cross-country was yours, football is someone else's, bird boxes is someone else's. You see what I mean? Everything's different, and I think that's maybe one of our strengths, because we can offer so much more, rather than being affiliated to one governing body, so to speak. But I think also, going back to what you said before, I thought around how do you increase the activity levels? It's about prevention's much better than healing. Where are the touch points in a young person's life that you can actually introduce physical activity without them even realising it? And one thing we've done is called the Schoolyard 14, with a couple of primary schools in Aberdeen. Now, if you could picture your own old-fashioned primary school, what did it look like? It's probably just a grey tarmac area. Yeah, probably. We started introducing simple as paint. Paint some lines, paint some activity. If you create a 6-lane running track in a kid's primary school, they're running up and down that whole 10 minutes just because they can. That's what kids do. And suddenly you've introduced physical activity for 10 minutes, 15 minutes in their day without even having to do anything. And that doesn't even cost much. You could, that's just one example we've tried to do to try and increase that physical activity levels. But sorry, I'm digressing slightly there.
No, that's fine. That's interesting. Thanks very much. Thanks, William.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. And I suppose, as Jackie just did, I, as an Edinburgh MSP, would also put on record just amazing work, which I know Spartans do, and also across the whole North Edinburgh community. You know, during the pandemic, I think most of us were just blown away with how the community just used you as a hub and transformed a lot of outcomes. So I think, you know, full of praise for everything which goes on. But I wanted to ask a couple of questions around capacity building, and it links to what I just said, because I know from speaking to other youth work organisations that they are concerned that often there isn't facilities. Now, you're very lucky with Ainsley Park as a foundation for people to come to know where you're at, but other groups who don't have those facilities, and just wondered what you think could change around that. I often get complaints in different parts of Edinburgh around not getting access to the school estate, for example, and Mark, you outlined just, you know, the overheads of actually running a facility can sometimes mean that you're not able to take forward, and you're in a lucky position around that. So just wondered where you, from your experiences, think there's more we could be doing, and actually the school estate or other community-owned public facilities can help facilitate more of this work. I'll maybe bring you in, Debbie.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think around the school estate and making it more accessible. Myself and Mark were talking just before we came in, and one of the best things that we ever did at Spartans when we opened our doors in 2008 was our street football in a safe place, where we open our doors after school every single day, and especially on a Friday half day, you know, there can be around about 100, 150 kids down. But actually what happened was, and a lot of people were talking about, it's going to get vandalised, the Astro's going to get put on fire. We've never had any issues because it's their space. So they respect it. Their parents respect it. So therefore, it's always been a protected space. And I think there's just that barrier of trust around the school estate and opening it up, and potentially resource and cost associated to it. I think the other area that I would say there to be investment and development is around community spaces like neighbourhood centres. In North Edinburgh, we've got some fantastic neighbourhood centres, but again, it's very much hand to mouth. Costs are a huge issue in terms of overheads and repairs. Staffing is an issue as well. So how can we collaborate with other organisations to be able to try and take that burden away, but again, have a kind of like social enterprise element similar to Spartans, where sometimes you've got to rob Peter to pay Paul, and that's okay, because ultimately, you know, Paul's going to be better off and is going to get access to a lot more services. I know there's several neighbourhood centres, like West Pilton and the Millennium Centre, that need investment around their infrastructure and the quality of their facility. Often people will say to me, oh, you must have loads of money at Spartans because you've spent £1.4 million on a new education and youth workspace. No, we don't have loads of money. We fundraised that money and we got funding and grants for it. But the most important part of that was making sure that that was a facility that young people felt that they deserved to be part of. We could have easily have put new structures around the existing building and invested a little bit internally, but it wouldn't have had the same impact because the children are so used to just walking into facilities that aren't fit for purpose, whether it's their home, whether it's their school or it's a community space. So there has to be further investment to allow collaboration to happen so that more groups can work together to provide bigger impact.
Winding back the years as our programme grew and getting more and more kids, I mentioned we had a mobile arena we used to use in these communities, but it can only hold like 30, 40 kids at the most. So when we started hitting 60, 80, 100 kids, we had to look for alternate options. Obviously, Astro pitches were the first easy one. However, janitors finish work at 5 o'clock and they've got the keys, so they can't open up, they can't lock up. So therefore, we couldn't use them. Simple as that. And that's where the kind of idea of, well, how can we do this? That's where the Cruyff courts came from. But also, when you have those fences or barriers as well, kids will climb them. They will find a way and they'll cut a hole, cause more damage, and that's where the antisocial behaviour can also stem from. Just get rid of them. Why do you need the big fence around an Astro pitch? Really, I appreciate because they're not being hard out. Most of them, they're just dead at night because there's no janitors and floodlights on or anything like that. An investment in just trusting your community would be useful, I think. But that's our point of view. Like I said, we've been very fortunate. We worked with partnership work to get the Cruyff courts happening, and then we're seeing the benefits of that. But it doesn't have to be a Cruyff court. It could be a school Astro pitch just without the big fences, to be quite honest. And then floodlights, orange sensors. They go off every 30 minutes. Press the button, turn them back on again, so on and so on. That would be a really cost-effective way to deliver something that we've created, like that Tory example, in multiple different communities, just in Aberdeen City, for example.
And what work do you think is going on to scope some of that, or isn't it? You've got your own organisations, but I know from speaking to parents who are looking towards how they sustain Brownies and Scouts, and they're often doing that because they want their kids to be part of it. Now, their kids will go through a lot, they will then leave, but no one else is coming up to pick up these these opportunities. And a lot of that often comes down to not being able to have a facility to actually go into. So I suppose my question is, how do we work to guarantee almost that free access? The council will always say to me, well, we've got to pay a janitor, that's £20 an hour, so we can't just do that for free. But your organisation, I know North Edinburgh Arts has also been doing a lot of work to let people in to that fantastic new facility. And again, to go back to your point, Debbie, I think when people see that investment, they really feel this is for them and things start to happen in the community. But there does seem to be a loss of some of these opportunities taking place. And I just almost think there needs to be a better scoping and maybe bringing all these organisations in to say, well, where can everyone get access to facilities who need it rather than just letting them fold?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's about mapping out what's available and working together. I mean, I know that, there's other sites around Edinburgh as well, like, Edinburgh South, and their barriers around about planning permission. We're proof that this works and that it has a huge positive impact on society and the general wide community. So for me, it's about working together, listening, sharing our learning and seeing what's possible, because actually there might be someone that's willing to open up that school ground that doesn't cost the council that £20. If the barrier is money, let's look for solutions around that. And if it is still that is still the problem, then how do we find the money? Because we know that the impact is going to be absolutely massive. The more kids that are putting down jumpers and playing on the streets, and I remember my days as a child growing up and playing Kirby and kicking a ball about. That's what we want to see more of them, being out, physically active, socialising with friends. We just need to be able to provide more safe environments for them to do so.
I need to fact check my numbers, but I believe it costs for a fire appliance to attend a false alarm costs about £3,000–4,000. Now, like I said, I don't know the numbers right, but these are normally caused by, unfortunately, young people who are just bored, making poor choices. What if physical activity in sports centres is free for under 16s? Completely free, subsidised, supported that way. Or supported, the local authority supported to provide janitors extra time to work, overtime, whatever it may be, so that court could be open, so that people could access it for free. We need a booking system. We need anything like that. I appreciate there'll be a lot of finance people going, that's just stupid, that's not a great idea at all. But it works in other places. Scandinavia have a lot of places that have kids don't pay to play, simple as that, no matter what it may be, and they have free to access sports centres. They subsidise it, I believe, by charging £1 extra for the adults that attend the gym or whatever it may be. Could that work in Scotland? I don't know the answer to that, but that's one concept that could actually help physical activity levels, youth annoyance levels, helping that janitor stay open to unlock the gate, whatever it may be. There's options out there, but the partnership working is key. Like you say, whilst we provide activity on these Cruyff courts, I get a lot of other organisations to use them as well, because it's theirs as well. It's the community, it's not ours, it's not councils, it's the young people. So other organisations that can provide free activity, they could use that to save them having to have hall hire, pitch hire, whatever it may be.
And it's that presumption that people should, instead of having to jump through hurdles to often get access. But no, thanks very much. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you very much. And Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you both very much indeed, actually, because you've left me with very little to ask, because you really, really have covered things very well, and thank you for that. Can I just ask, though, the Sports Scotland strategy, Sport for Life, was first published in 2019, although it seems longer ago, really, actually, in head. Is that something that has been a useful guide for yourselves and your organisations, or do you think it's something that needs to take on board more of what you already do?
It's difficult. Sports Scotland, obviously, the national governing bodies, they're all affiliated with Sports Scotland. Where do we fit in? We're a third sector charity. So for us, it's nice to know. It's good to see that there is kind of things. But for example, the funding streams that can come from the Sports Scotland thing, the Sport Facilities Fund. It's difficult for us to go because we don't have a facility, so to speak. They don't cover maintenance, so it doesn't help with the Cruyff courts, for example. The smaller grants, they're almost like just below being enough to do something, if that makes sense. So from someone who's not a national governing body or affiliated to one, it's quite difficult. And whilst we can see where we may tie in and help, I don't think it's made for our type of organisation in general, even though we use sport for the power good. So I think if there was to be revamped or a new one coming, the power sport should be focused more in there rather than club sport and achieving. It needs to be the wider benefits of sport as well.
Okay, thank you. And Debbie?
Yes, we work closely with Sports Scotland and obviously active schools in the local community. In terms of our work with Sports Scotland, for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, we've been part of a collaboration with Move On and, in fact, it's not Move On, it's First Sport, and we are delivering a Changemakers course that ultimately is there for young leaders of sports clubs, active schools coordinators, and what we focus on is around meeting community need, because I think Sports Scotland recognised that there was a gap there within clubs and sporting organisations and national governing bodies around how do you work out what your moral compass is, what your why is going to be as an organisation, and how is that important to bringing in the community into your club. So we work closely with them on delivering that programme, and we're just about to deliver to a new cohort and have the opportunity to deliver another year and then potentially another 2 years added on after that. So I do think Sports Scotland do have a greater interest now in understanding community need and the impact that sport can have. And hopefully by delivering the Changemakers course and Changing Lives course, we can filter that down from our experiences, and that can then filter into more clubs across Scotland around making sure that they understand that they have a commitment to their community and the social impact element.
Really interesting. Thanks very much. No, it's just because, pardon me, I thought that it would be the type of strategy that would overarch just about everything that's going on in Scotland, sort of thing, you know, but maybe there are elements where it's not really filtered into that area, and it could be something that should be looked at, actually, to make it more accessible.
Yeah, we work in, like I said, there's not many organisations like us. That's fine. But that is an area that's growing. You know, more organisations like us are starting to appear around the country. So that is, I think, an area that Sports Scotland could look at a bit more and incorporate into their support.
Okay, well, it's been useful then from the point of view that hopefully they will pick up from here what's being looked for, but also recognising what Debbie was saying about the good links that you've actually already got established there. So that's fine.
Yeah, I definitely think their social conscience is there, and they understand the power of sport and the benefits that can not only have at a recreational or developmental level, but also at a performance level as well, too. I think that's really important.
Well, thank you both very much indeed. That was useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the questions from committee members. Can I thank you both very much for attending today? I said in my opening questions, I think what you're doing is inspirational. I think it really is outstanding, and I hope your appearance at committee today has been able to amplify what you're doing and what other clubs and organisations are doing to help young people through sport. So thank you once again for attending today. Can I also say this?
Points of
course, yes,
I'm not on my soapbox, don't worry.
Yeah.
I appreciate the Scottish Government, the committee here today. You know, you kind of support how things happen across the country, especially around funding and things like that. So this isn't a big ask. It's nothing like that. Don't worry. It's just from my point of view. I want to reiterate, it's my point of view. It's not like the wider network that I kind of represent. But just when considering funding, to ensure that's the kind of multi-year funding. So I'm going to read from this. Multi-year funding for community prevention programmes. Long-term programmes that we do require long-term investment. The short-term funding cycles just undermine our kind of relationship-built work that we rely on. It takes time to get to know these disadvantaged kids. So it's important that we don't offer 6, 10, 3-month programmes. So funding to support long-term work is really important to our kind of sector in the area we work in. Also dedicated investment in after-school stuff. You know, the evening work, organisations provide weekend, evening opportunities for young people. And then also support for community-led outdoor facilities, like I've mentioned kind of a few things earlier on around where we would need help to actually expand, grow, do more for young people. Then also workforce investment in youth work and outreach roles. My team are called street sport coaches, but they're not coaches, they're youth workers. You know, and that being recognised, you know, youth workers are a key part in the power of sport and what we do. It's building up those relationships of support around, you know, how can we help more of these into the industry. There's no real formal qualification, for example, so that's something we're looking at. One of my side projects is to create a degree around kind of developing the workforce that can work in this area, because there isn't there a degree or anything like that in there. And then also national recognition support for children affected by imprisonment. You know, the power of sport can be massive for these families and the young people. It can actually change their routes. And you can imagine how much money it costs, you know, when someone's in jail and all that kind of adding up through the years. If we can get them in early, support them, hopefully that path will change. But that was all I had.
No, I think that's a very useful context to add at the end of what has been a very useful session. So thank you very much for that. Can I also say this will be the final meeting of the Education, Children and Young People Committee in this session. So could I just take a moment to thank a number of individuals who have facilitated our work since I became convener about 18 months ago, and indeed since this committee was formed after the 2021 Scottish election. Could I begin by thanking our clerks, Pauline, Claire, Gemma, Ali, Chris and Jane in the clerking team do a power of work. I understand at times I've not always made that work easy or straightforward, but they have been extremely professional in how they have supported this committee, a very important committee for this Parliament. And a lot of the recognition that we have received as members on this committee and the work of our committee is down to the outstanding contribution to our clerking team. And I'd like to recognise that on behalf of myself as convener, but indeed the whole committee. Could I also thank committee members, past and present, for their input. Again, at times we have not always agreed, but I think we've come together at important points to produce work that has been important for this Parliament and organisations and individuals outside Parliament as well. Outside the clerking team, we have been very ably supported by Tom in communications, by Ned and Lynn in the research for our papers. A lot of the material that we then use to question our witnesses is down to the work of Ned and Lynn and their research. Anne Leoncha and others in the outreach team have ensured the work we do is not just in this building, in this committee room, but also taking Parliament to people up and down the country. Could I also make reference to our broadcasting team and the official record, the official report, because our meetings sometimes go on a bit longer than other committee meetings because of the interest that members have, and they've been a great addition to the work we do. And finally, can I thank everyone who has engaged with this committee over this 5-year term in Parliament. Our witnesses make the work we do very special, very important, and being able to come into Parliament either as witnesses or to respond to our call for evidence has ensured the work that we produce is the better for the input of our witnesses. So can I thank everyone who has been involved in this committee over the last 5 years. Can I wish our successor committee all the very best going forward for what is a very important area for Scottish politics. And for the final time, can I formally close this meeting? Thank you.